The name of the contractor starting the demolition on my kitchen was the first thing my daughter-in-law, Chloe, said to me that morning. The phone felt suddenly slick and cold in my hand, my knuckles turning white where I gripped it. A stone formed behind my sternum, heavy and immovable, as her voice, a chipper, melodic thing, continued on about paint swatches and knocking down the wall between the dining room and my study. My study. My son Mark's wife was talking about demolishing the room where my husband's books still lined the shelves. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 78 years old, and I have lived in this house for 52 of them. But there was something Chloe and my own son didn't know about this house. If they only knew what they had just thrown away with their talk of greige paint and open concept living. To understand why my hand didn't tremble, why my own voice, when it came, was as quiet as a prayer, you need to know who I really am. You need to know about Robert. To understand me, you have to understand the scent of old paper and cedar, the specific weight of a hard-bound book in your hands. I was a librarian for 40 years, not a manager, not a director, a reference librarian, a woman who found answers. I liked the quiet order of it, the Dewey Decimal System, a kind of elegant scripture that could lead you from a question to a truth. My life was built on such systems, small, reliable, and true. I met Robert in the architecture section of the main branch library. He had a smudge of graphite on his cheek, and his hair was perpetually rumpled, as if he'd just run his hands through it in frustration or inspiration. He was looking for a book on Renaissance masonry techniques, something obscure. I found it for him in the deep stacks, a place that smelled of dust and time. He had chalk dust permanently embedded in the cuffs of his shirts, and a way of looking at a building, not as a structure, but as a story. He told me that first day, a building remembers. It holds the echo of every person who has lived inside it. We married a year later. We had very little. Our first apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up where the radiator hissed like a cornered snake and the windows rattled with every passing bus. But it was ours. We'd sit on the floor because we couldn't yet afford a sofa, eating takeout from cardboard boxes and drawing our dream house on napkins. Robert would sketch roof lines and window placements, his hand moving with a fluid grace that always mesmerized me. Big windows, Ellie, he'd say, his voice soft. A house should be filled with light. He was an architect, a good one, but not a famous one. He worked for a small, respectable firm, designing schools and municipal buildings. Solid, dependable work that paid the bills, but wouldn't make us rich. Or so I thought. His passion, the thing he called his hobby, like other men might call fishing theirs, was something else entirely. He'd spend his evenings not with the sports page, but with city zoning maps and obscure financial journals. Spread across the dining table I had inherited from my mother. He was fascinated by the forgotten parts of the city, the old warehouse districts, the abandoned factory zones, the neighborhoods everyone else had written off. He saw not decay, but potential. Good bones, Ellie, he'd whisper, tapping a faded map with the end of his pencil. They just need a new skin. When our son, Mark, was born, we finally had enough saved for a down payment on a house. We found this place a modest two-story brick house on a street lined with oak trees. It was neglected. The porch steps had been repaired so many times each one was a different shade of wood, and the garden was a tangle of weeds. But it had big windows. It was filled with light. Robert put his heart into this house. He rebuilt the porch himself, laid the stone path to the front door, and built the bookshelves in the study, floor to ceiling, to hold my growing collection. Each plank of wood, each nail was a testament to his love. This house wasn't just wood and brick. It was the physical manifestation of our life together. It was our memory palace. Mark grew up in this house. His height chart is still there, faint pencil marks on the doorframe of the pantry. I remember him as a small boy with a gap-toothed smile, his hand a warm, trusting weight in mine. He loved Robert's workshop in the garage, the smell of sawdust and turpentine. Robert would let him hold the blueprints, explaining the lines and symbols, teaching him how a simple drawing could become a place of shelter and safety. He was a good boy, a kind boy. Then he went to college and met Chloe. The first time he brought her home, she walked into my living room, her eyes scanning everything, not with curiosity, but with assessment. I remember the smell of her perfume, something expensive and sharp that seemed to suck the familiar scent of books and lemon polish right out of the air. She was beautiful, polished, her clothes speaking of a world I didn't know or aspire to. She ran a manicured hand over the arm of my worn, comfortable armchair, the one Robert and I had finally bought after years of saving. How cozy, she said. The word was a perfectly polished stone dropped into the quiet pool of my life, and the ripples have been spreading ever since. Cozy. It was the first of many such words. She called my home-cooked meals rustic. My love of gardening was quaint. My charcoal gray sheath dress I'd owned for years and still loved was admirably practical. Each compliment was a tiny, perfectly aimed dart, designed to tell me that my life was small and hers was large. I learned, in fragments of conversation, about her childhood. She never spoke of it directly, but Mark did, in hushed, sympathetic tones. She'd grown up in a town I'd never heard of, in a trailer park near a chemical plant. Her father was a factory worker. Mark once told me a story, one he thought was romantic, about how Chloe had sworn on her high school graduation day that she would never, ever be poor again. He didn't understand that a vow like that isn't about ambition, it's about fear. A deep, cold fear that hollows you out. I saw it in her once, a flicker of it. We were at a company picnic for Mark's firm. One of the senior partner's wives, a woman dripping in diamonds, had made a dismissive comment about another woman's handbag. Chloe's face, just for a second, went completely blank. Her posture stiffened. She was seeing something else, something from a long time ago. In that moment, I understood her. I understood that her obsession with brands and status wasn't about joy. It was about armor. It was about making sure no one could ever make her feel the way she must have felt as a child. I understood it, but understanding is not the same as excusing. When they got married, the financial ledger of my life began in earnest. They wanted a wedding at the plaza. It's Chloe's dream, Mom, Mark had said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. The cost was astronomical. I took the checkbook from the drawer in my desk, the one with the faded floral pattern. I wrote them a check for $20,000. That was the money Robert and I had saved for a trip to see the cathedrals of Europe. We'd never taken it. For the wedding, I said, my voice even. Then came the down payment on their apartment. They wanted to live in the city, in a new glass tower with a doorman and a gym. The asking prices made my breath catch. We just need a little help with the down payment, Mom, Mark explained over the phone, just to get us over the line. The banks are so tight. Chloe on the extension added, it's an investment, Eleanor. Property values in this neighborhood are skyrocketing. I went to the bank. I sold a portion of the stock portfolio Robert had started for me, the one he called our rainy day fund. I gave them $50,000. That was nearly all of my personal savings, the money I had put aside over 40 years. My what if fund. What if the roof leaks? What if the car dies for good? I gave it to them. The ledger grew. A loan of $10,000 for Mark to start a consulting business that never seemed to consult anyone. It vanished in a flurry of expensive dinners and a trip to Aspen. $5,000 to cover Chloe's credit card debt, which she vaguely referred to as a temporary cash flow issue. Another $15,000 when Mark lost his job and they needed to maintain their lifestyle while he looked for a new one. Each time it was a phone call. Each time Mark's voice was strained with a practiced shame that was starting to sound thin. Each time Chloe's voice was smooth, logical, framing it not as a gift, but as a sensible reallocation of family assets. You're not really using this money, Eleanor, she'd said once. It's just sitting there. We can put it to work. Robert had been gone for 5 years. He died peacefully, in his sleep, in our bed. In the weeks after, when the house felt cavernously empty and silent, his lawyer, a kind, formal man named Mr. Davies, had called me into his office. The office smelled of old leather and fresh coffee. Mr. Davies had been Robert's friend as well as his counsel. He had a small framed photo of his own family on his desk, his wife and two daughters smiling from a beach somewhere. Eleanor, he said, his voice gentle, Robert left everything to you, of course, but he left it in a rather specific way. He pushed a thick binder across the polished mahogany desk. The cover read, Vance Urban Properties, LLC. Robert's hobby, Mr. Davies said with a small smile, was rather more profitable than he let on. He didn't want to worry you with the details. He said you had enough to manage. I opened the binder. Inside were deeds, incorporation papers, and financial statements that made no sense to me. Page after page of properties, a derelict textile mill in the garment district, a row of boarded-up warehouses by the old docks, a small, ugly office building downtown that I recognized from the bus route. And this house, our house, it was listed as an asset of the corporation. Mr. Davies explained it slowly. Over 30 years, Robert had used his architect's eye to buy undervalued commercial real estate. He'd sit on them sometimes for decades, until the city grew around them, until his vision caught up with reality. The textile mill was now luxury lofts. The warehouses were a bustling marketplace. The ugly office building was sitting on land that a tech giant wanted for its new headquarters. The portfolio, he explained, was worth. I remember seeing the number and feeling a wave of dizziness. It was a fortune, a staggering amount of money that felt unreal, like something from one of the novels on my shelves. It's all held in a trust, Mr. Davies had said. You are the sole beneficiary. The trust pays you a very, very generous annual stipend, far more than you've ever used. The rest is reinvested. The principal is considerable. He paused, looking at me with kind, serious eyes. Robert also left a letter for you, and one for Mark, which he asked me to give you to hold, to give to Mark when he became a man. His words. I took the letters. Robert's letter to me explained everything. He did it for us, for security, but he kept it quiet because he didn't want money to change us. Our life is rich enough, Ellie, he wrote in his familiar slanted script. This is just insulation, just in case. He trusted me to be the steward of it, to use it wisely. He never wanted Mark to know about it until he was mature enough to handle the knowledge, until he had made his own way in the world. I put Mark's letter in the locked box in Robert's study, along with the corporate papers. And I went on, living my life exactly as I had before. I had my pension. I had Social Security. I had the stipend from the trust, most of which I never touched. I lived in my house, tended my garden, and read my books. The money was abstract. My life was real. I chose humility not as a performance, but as a preference. It was who I was. The money was Robert's secret, and we was keep it for him. The total I had given Mark and Chloe from my own savings and the smaller accounts Robert had left me outside the trust came to $95,000. I knew the number because I had written it down on a piece of paper I kept in my desk drawer. $95,000. It felt like a monument to my own foolish hope. And now Chloe was on the phone, talking about contractors. The brochure was still on my kitchen table, where they had left it an hour before. Golden Meadows Senior Living. The picture showed smiling, silver-haired people playing shuffleboard and taking watercolor classes. The facility, when they had driven me there for a tour, had smelled of antiseptic and something vaguely like boiled cabbage. It was clean, it was safe, and it was a waiting room for death. Mom, it's just not safe for you here anymore, Mark had said, his face a mask of strained concern. All these stairs, the maintenance, you're all alone. We found a wonderful one-bedroom unit for you, Chloe had chimed in, her hand on my arm, a gesture that was meant to look like comfort but felt like a leash. It has a view of the garden. The garden was a concrete patio with a few potted geraniums. We'll handle everything, she'd continued. Selling the house will give you a nice nest egg. More than enough to cover the fees at Golden Meadows for years and years. You won't have to worry about a thing. There it was, selling the house, my house, the house Robert built, the house that wasn't, in the simple way they imagined, mine to sell. The contractor's name is Jim, Chloe was saying now, her voice pulling me back to the present. He's done some fabulous work for friends of ours. He can start on Monday. We want to get the kitchen and the main floor done before we list it. A modern kitchen can add 20% to the sale price, you know. A cold clarity washed through me, sharp and clean as winter air. It wasn't confusion or grief anymore. It was something else. The stone behind my sternum didn't dissolve. It hardened into diamond. For years I had been telling myself a story, that my son loved me, that he was just weak, that his wife was a difficult but ultimately harmless influence. I had told myself that my generosity was what a mother does. But that story was a fiction. I was not a mother to them. I was a resource, a line of credit that was about to be closed, and once the last asset, my house, was liquidated, I would be moved to a single room with a view of some potted plants and left to wait. They were not just taking my house, they were taking my life, or what was left of it. They were erasing me, erasing Robert. I looked at the phone in my hand. I looked at the brochure on the table, the smiling vacant faces, the sterile promise of a life with no sharp edges, no purpose, no meaning. Eleanor, are you there? Chloe's voice had a sliver of impatience in it now. My own voice, when it came out, was different. It was no longer the voice of a woman asking for permission to exist. It was quiet, but it was not small. Yes, Chloe, I'm here. Good, she said, relieved. So Monday is okay for Jim to start? I took a slow breath. I looked at the bookshelf Robert had built, at the spines of the books that had been my life's companions. Yes, I said. Monday is fine. I hung up the phone. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The house seemed to be holding its breath with me. I walked over to the brochure for Golden Meadows. The paper was glossy and cool beneath my fingers. I picked it up, walked to the trash can under the sink, and dropped it inside. It landed with a soft, final thud. Then I went to Robert's study. I sat at his desk, the worn leather of the chair cool against my arms. I opened the bottom drawer and took out the small locked metal box. The key was on my house key ring, where it had been for 5 years. I unlocked the box. Inside was the thick binder for Vance Urban Properties, and on top of it, 2 envelopes, one addressed to my Ellie, the other to my son Mark. I took out the binder and the business card tucked inside the front pocket. Davis, Abernathy, and Finch, attorneys at law. I picked up the phone on Robert's desk. It was time to find an answer. The call to Mr. Davis's office was the first step. His secretary, a woman with a warm, professional voice, remembered me. Of course, Mrs. Vance. Mr. Davis will be so pleased to hear from you. Can you hold for a moment? The hold music was some bland, classical piece, but it felt like a symphony of purpose. Eleanor, Mr. Davis's voice, came on the line, and the warmth in it was genuine. It wasn't the strained, careful warmth of my son, but the real thing. How are you? It's been too long. I'm well, James, I said, using his first name as he had always insisted. But I need to see you. Something has come up regarding the house. Of course, he said, his tone shifting immediately to one of professional focus. Is everything all right? I'm not sure, I said, and the honesty of that statement felt good. That's what I need your help to determine. We set an appointment for the next day. The rest of that afternoon I moved through my house as if in a dream. I touched the cool, smooth wood of the dining table my mother had given me, the one where Robert had spread out his maps. I ran my hand along the spines of the books in the study, their familiar textures a comfort. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the wall Chloe wanted to demolish. It was the wall where I had taught Mark to bake cookies, the wall that still had a barely visible splash of batter near the ceiling from a particularly enthusiastic mixing session when he was 6. These were not just walls and furniture. They were memories. They were my life, and I was not going to let them be painted over in restrained grades. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through the financial ledger I kept, the single sheet of paper in my desk. Each entry was a small, sharp pain. $20,000. Wedding. I remembered the joy on Mark's face, a joy I had paid for. 50,000 apartment down. Payment. I remembered the brochure for their glass tower, how proud they were, a pride I had subsidized. The list went on. The total at the bottom was stark, $95,000. I added a new line. Estimated value of house, $850,000. Then I wrote, cost of Golden Meadows, my remaining years. The ink was black and final. The next morning I put on my good charcoal gray dress, the admirably practical one. I took a bus downtown. Mr. Davies's office was on the 40th floor of a gleaming skyscraper, one of the new ones that had shot up in the last decade. The elevator was silent and swift. The reception area was hushed, smelling of leather and expensive clean air. Mr. Davies met me himself, shaking my hand warmly. Eleanor, come in. His office was just as I remembered it, but the view was different. From here, you could see the whole city spread out like one of Robert's maps. He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Coffee? Water? Water would be lovely. Thank you, I said. He poured it himself from a crystal pitcher. He didn't rush me. He simply sat, his hands resting on his desk, and waited. I told him everything. I told him about the visit to Golden Meadows, the brochure, the phone call from Chloe about the contractor. I told him about their plans to renovate and sell my house. As I spoke, his expression remained neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten. I saw his fingers pressed together, the knuckles going white for just a moment. When I finished, there was a long silence in the room, broken only by the faint hum of the city 40 floors below. Mr. Davies took a slow breath. They plan to sell the house, he said, his voice flat. That is their intention, I confirmed, and they believe you are the sole owner and that you will cooperate in this. They believe I have no other choice. He leaned forward. Eleanor, do they have power of attorney? Any legal standing that would allow them to make these decisions? No, I said. Nothing like that. They are relying on emotional pressure, on the idea that I am old and confused and a burden. I see. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Robert was a brilliant man, he said, his back to me, but he was also a romantic. He believed that character was innate, that a good heart couldn't be corrupted. He wanted to protect Mark from the weight of wealth, to let him become his own man. He turned back to me, his face etched with a kind of sad resolve. It seems we have failed in that. It's not your failure, James, I said softly. Perhaps not. He came back to his desk and sat down. But we can correct the situation. Your options, Eleanor, are quite clear. First, we need to understand the full scope of what you are the beneficiary of. He pulled a file from his drawer, a thick one, much thicker than my binder. The trust has performed exceptionally well since Robert's passing. The property on which the new Axiom headquarters was built, that was yours. The sale finalized last year. Your net worth is not what it was 5 years ago. It is substantially more. He turned the file around and showed me a single number at the bottom of a page. It was so large it seemed to have too many commas. I felt a wave of vertigo, the same feeling I had had when he first showed me the portfolio, but magnified 100 times. I gripped the arms of the chair. All this time I had been doling out my savings, worrying about my small pension while this empire sat waiting. Mr. Davies saw the look on my face. His professional demeanor softened. My own mother, he said, his voice quiet, lived in the same small house for 60 years. After my father died, my brother tried to get her to sell it, said it was for her own good. What he really wanted was the inheritance. Sometimes even good people see an elderly parent not as a person, but as a problem to be solved. My mother refused. She died in that house in her own bed. It was the last best gift she gave herself. He cleared his throat. I'm sorry, that was unprofessional. No, I said, my voice thick. Thank you, James. All right, he said, his tone brisk again. Here is what we can do. Legally, they can't do a thing. The house is owned by Vance Urban Properties. You are the sole director of the trust that controls the LLC. They can't sell it. They can't even legally authorize a contractor to hammer a single nail into a wall. Any work they commission would be destruction of corporate property. A strange sense of lightness filled my chest. Not joy, not yet, but the feeling of a great weight beginning to lift. So what do I do? I asked. You have several choices, he said, ticking them off on his fingers. 1. We can send them a cease and desist letter. Formal, legal, final. It would stop them in their tracks. 2. We can arrange a meeting here, in this office, where I explain the legal reality of the situation to them. 3. He paused, a thoughtful look on his face. Or you can let them proceed. I stared at him. Let them proceed? Let them hire a contractor? Let them believe they are in control, he clarified. Let them expose themselves. Chloe, you said, likes to perform. Let her put on the performance of her life. And you, Eleanor, will choose the moment the curtain falls. He leaned forward again. They have put a price on your life. They have calculated your worth down to the square footage of a room in an assisted living facility. Perhaps it's time they understood what a miscalculation they've made. I thought of Chloe's voice on the phone, so bright and confident. I thought of the paint swatches. I thought of my kitchen, the heart of my home, being gutted. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. Robert had built a fortress to protect me, and I had been living in one room of it, afraid to walk the halls. No more. Tell me about option 3, I said. The next few days were a strange ballet of deception. I played the part they had assigned me, the frail, confused, compliant mother. When Mark called, his voice thick with that false sympathy, I was quiet and agreeable. Yes, dear, if you think it's for the best. It is, Mom, really. It's for your own good, he'd say, the relief in his voice palpable. Chloe sent me texts with links to minimalist furniture and photos of stainless steel appliances. Won't this be fabulous, Eleanor? So clean and modern, I would reply with a simple, looks nice. Each text was a small twist of the knife, but I was beginning to feel a strange detachment, as if I were watching a play. On Saturday, 2 days before the contractor was due to arrive, Chloe and Mark came over. They brought boxes. To help you start packing, Chloe announced, placing a stack of flattened cardboard on my dining room table. The smell of her perfume filled the air. Again, we should start with the study. All these books, they're so heavy. And honestly, who keeps books anymore? I felt a surge of something hot in my chest, but I pressed it down. I looked at the shelves Robert had built, at the books that were the story of my life. You're right, I said, my voice a whisper. They are heavy. Mark, at least, had the grace to look uncomfortable. He picked up a leather-bound copy of Moby Dick, one of Robert's favorites. Dad loved this one, he said quietly. Mike, it will look great on a Kindle, Chloe said, not unkindly, but with the simple, brutal practicality of someone who sees no value in the object itself, only its content. She patted Mark's arm. Come on, honey, let's not get sentimental. We have a lot to do. They spent 2 hours helping me. They wrapped my mother's china in newspaper and put it in a box labeled Kitchen Fragile. They took down the framed photos from the mantelpiece. My wedding photo, Mark as a baby, Robert standing proudly in front of a building he designed. They stacked them on the floor, ready to be boxed. With every object they touched, a piece of my history was being sorted and packed for disposal. I sat in my armchair watching them, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. I was a ghost in my own life, but I was a ghost with a plan. That evening after they left, I called a locksmith. The company sent a young man with kind eyes and calloused hands. His name was Ben. The diner from the blueprint feels more original, but a locksmith is more narratively connected to the house. Let's stick with the locksmith. He arrived in a van that smelled of metal shavings and oil. Changing the locks, ma'am, chandeliers? He asked as he examined my front door. Yes, I said, all of them. He worked efficiently, his tools making small yet precise clicks and whirs. As he fitted the new deadbolt, he looked at me. You know, I've been doing this for 15 years. You learn a lot about people from their locks. Some people want fortresses. Some people just want to feel safe. He paused, wiping his hands on a rag. But a good lock isn't about keeping people out. It's about deciding who you let in. The key, he said, holding up the new gleaming brass key, is just the last part of that decision. You're the one who decides who gets one. He handed me the set of 2 keys. They felt heavy and powerful in my palm. When he left, I locked the new deadbolt. The sound it made was solid, definitive, a sound of a door closing on one part of my life and another opening. I did not give a key to Mark or Chloe. On Sunday, the day before the demolition was set to begin, I received an email. It was an evite from Chloe. The subject line read, "You're invited. A new beginnings, housewarming, and renovation kickoff." My stomach tightened. I opened it. It was an invitation to a party at my house next Saturday. Join us as we celebrate the next chapter for this wonderful home, the text read. We're saying goodbye to the old and hello to the new. Come see the before and hear our vision for the after. Bubbly and bites will be served. It was breathtaking, the audacity of it. She was inviting her friends, her social circle, to come and witness her conquest, to stand in my home and listen to her talk about how she was going to tear it apart and remake it in her own image. This wasn't just about selling a house. This was a victory party. My humiliation was to be the main event. Mr. Davis had been right. Let her put on the performance of her life. I clicked attending. The phone rang an hour later. It was Chloe, her voice effervescent. Eleanor, you saw the invitation? Isn't it a fun idea? A way to give the house a proper send-off. It's an idea, I said. Listen, she continued, her tone shifting slightly, becoming more serious, more condescendingly gentle. I know this is hard for you, all this change, but I need you to do something for me at the party. What is that, Chloe? Just be your sweet self. Mingle a little, but maybe find a comfortable chair. My friends, they won't understand the history of this place. Let Mark and me handle the hosting. We want everyone to feel excited about the future, not sad about the past. She wanted me to be a prop, a quiet, smiling, elderly prop in the corner, validating her takeover with my silent presence. I understand, I said. Perfect, she chirped. It's going to be a wonderful party. You'll see. After I hung up, I went back to Robert's study. I sat at his desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. At the top, I wrote Vance Urban Properties, LLC. And then I began to make a list. On Monday morning, a large white van pulled up in front of my house. The side was emblazoned with JD Construction, Quality Renovations. A man in his late 40s with a sturdy build and a friendly weathered face got out. This must be Jim. He walked up the stone path and rang the bell. I opened the door. Good morning, I said. Morning, ma'am, he said, looking a bit surprised to see me. Jim from JD Construction. I'm here to start on the kitchen demo. Chloe sent me over? Yes, she told me, I said. Please, come in. He stepped into the entryway, his work boots silent on the rug. He smelled of sawdust and coffee. His eyes scanned the living room, the archway to the dining room. He was a man who knew buildings. I could see it in his gaze. Nice place, he said, a genuine appreciation in his voice. Good bones. The phrase sent a small shock through me. Robert's phrase. My husband was an architect, I said. He designed the renovations himself many years ago. I can tell, he said, nodding. You don't see work like this much anymore. Solid. He looked back at me, a clipboard in his hand. So the plan is to take out this wall here between the dining room and the study and a full gut of the kitchen. New cabinets, new island, the works. He looked around again, a slight frown on his face. It's a shame to tear into it, to be honest. This is quality work. Plans change, I said quietly. He gave me a sympathetic look. Yeah, I hear you. He cleared his throat, getting back to business. Well, my crew will be here in about an hour. We'll start by putting up plastic to control the dust and then get to it. He paused, looking at my name on his work order. Vance. Is your husband's name? Was it Robert Vance? I felt my heart skip a beat. Yes, I said. How did you know? A slow smile spread across his face. I thought I recognized the name and the look of the place. He gave me my first job. I was just a kid, 19 years old, working as a laborer on a school he designed over in the West End. He was a good man, tough but fair. He caught me reading the blueprints one lunch break, and instead of yelling at me, he sat down and explained what it all meant. He's the reason I got into this business. He shook his head, a look of fond memory in his eyes. Small world. Something clicked into place. A piece of the puzzle I didn't even know was missing. Jim, I said, my voice steady, I have a proposition for you. A different job, a much bigger one, I think. He looked confused. Ma'am? Let your crew take the day off, I said, with pay. I will cover it. And then you and I need to talk, not about demolition, about restoration. The look on his face shifted from confusion to intrigue. He saw the seriousness in my eyes. He glanced at the work order from Chloe, then back at me, the woman whose husband had given him his start. He made a decision. Okay, Mrs. Vance, he said slowly, let's talk. That night, I went to my bedroom closet and looked at my clothes, my admirably practical collection of grays and navies. I thought about the party, about Chloe's friends, about the image she wanted me to project. Then I called a car service. I went to a department store downtown, a place I hadn't set foot in for over a decade. The air was thick with 100 competing perfumes. I walked past the glittering counters and racks of shimmering, youthful clothes. I found the section for women like me, but the clothes were all beige and muted lavender, clothes that seemed designed to help one fade away. I walked right past them. I found a boutique in a quieter corner of the store. The saleswoman was elegant, her hair in a silver chignon. She looked at my simple dress and my canvas tote bag with a faded museum logo, and her smile was polite but distant. May I help you? Yes, I said. I am going to a party. I need a dress. I chose a dress of deep sapphire blue silk. It had long sleeves and a simple, elegant cut that skimmed the body rather than clinging to it. It was not cozy or practical. It was beautiful. I bought new shoes, a low heel in a matching blue. I bought a small silver clutch. The total cost more than my monthly pension. I paid with the new debit card Mr. Davies had procured for me, linked to the trust's operating account. The saleswoman's demeanor changed subtly when she saw the card, a heavy, dark metal I hadn't seen before. Her smile became warmer, more genuine. It was a small, ugly lesson, but a useful one. The week leading up to the party was quiet. I had told Chloe that the contractor had a scheduling conflict and would start the week after. She was annoyed, but accepted it. So much for a renovation kickoff party, she'd grumbled. Now it's just a goodbye old house party. Yes, I'd said, a goodbye party. I spent the week with Jim the contractor and a structural engineer he recommended. We walked through the house, not with an eye for demolition, but for preservation. We looked at Robert's original drawings, which I had retrieved from his old files. We talked about restoring the porch, refinishing the original hardwood floors that were hiding under worn carpets, and updating the plumbing and electrical systems without disturbing the soul of the house. I signed a contract with Jim, a real one, for a full restoration. The budget was significant, but it was a fraction of the number Mr. Davies had shown me. I was not just saving my house, I was honoring my husband. On Friday, the day before the party, a delivery arrived. It was an orchid, a magnificent spray of white phalaenopsis, in a simple ceramic pot. The card read, "A house with good bones deserves a living thing. Edo, J. Jim." I placed it on the mantelpiece. right where my wedding photo used to be. It was the only object there. It looked perfect. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I found myself standing in the dark of my living room, looking out the large window at the moonlit street. This was the mirror moment, a lifetime of avoiding confrontation, of keeping the peace, of being the quiet, reasonable one, was warring with the woman I was becoming. I thought of Mark as a little boy, his small, warm body curled up against me as I read him a story. The memory was so vivid it was a physical ache in my chest. Did I have to do this? Did I have to humiliate him, his wife, in front of all their friends? Couldn't I just have Mr. Davies send the letter? I remembered the weight of his small hand in mine, how he had trusted me completely. And I felt a wave of profound grief, not for the money, not for the house, but for the loss of that little boy, for the man he had not become, the man Robert had hoped he would be. I thought of Robert's letter for him, still locked in the metal box. Give it to him when he becomes a man. I was still waiting. The grief was a cold, heavy blanket. Was this justice worth the cost? Destroying what was left of my family to save my house. I walked into the study and my hand fell on Robert's old drafting pencil, heavy and cool in its cup. I picked it up. Good lines make good buildings, he used to say, but they also make good lives, clear, honest, true lines. My life with Mark and Chloe had become a tangle of crooked lines, of lies and manipulations. I was not destroying my family. They had already destroyed it. I was simply drawing a new, clean line, a boundary. The doubt receded, replaced by a calm, cold certainty. I put the pencil back in its cup. I went to my closet and looked at the sapphire blue dress hanging there. I was ready. I would not be a ghost at this party. I would be the foundation. Saturday arrived, a bright, crisp autumn day. By 7 o'clock, the house was filled with people. Chloe's friends. They were loud, fashionable, and exuded an aura of effortless wealth. The air, which usually smelled of my books and cedar, was now thick with expensive perfume and the scent of money. Caterers in black uniforms moved through the rooms with trays of champagne and elaborate canapes. Chloe was in her element. She wore a shimmering backless gown of silver sequins, her laughter bright and frequent as she moved through the crowd, her hand possessively on Mark's arm. She was holding court. My son looked less comfortable. He was wearing a suit that looked too tight in the shoulders, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He saw me standing near the doorway to the study and came over. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "you look nice." The surprise in his voice was unflattering. "Thank you, dear," I said. "You do too. Listen, Chloe's about to say a few words. Just remember what we talked about. Keep it simple." He patted my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring but felt deeply patronizing, and then retreated back to his wife's side. I watched them. They stood near the fireplace, Chloe glowing, Mark a pale reflection beside her. I was invisible to them, an elderly relative in a nice dress, parked quietly out of the way. Chloe's friends swirled around them, their talk a mix of brand names and vacation spots. "We just got back from St. Bart's. Did you see the new collection at Chanel? My decorator is a genius, but he costs a fortune." It was a language I did not speak. A woman with a severe haircut and a dress that looked like it was made of black plastic turned to her friend and gestured vaguely at my living room. "The potential is here," she said, her voice carrying, "but it's so brown. Chloe will work wonders." I took a sip of the water I was holding. I waited. Finally, Chloe clinked a glass with a spoon. The chatter subsided. "Hi, everyone," she said, beaming. "Thank you all so much for coming. Mark and I are so excited to start this new chapter." She gestured around the room. "As you can see, this house has the most amazing bones, a real classic, but it's ready for a new vision. We're going to open it all up, bring in the light, make it a space for modern living." She was magnificent, in her element, selling a future that was built on my erasure. Her friends looked on, their faces rapt with admiration. Mark stood beside her, looking proud and miserable at the same time. We want this to be a place where we can entertain all of you, she continued, a place of joy and celebration. We're saying goodbye to the past and embracing a bright, beautiful future. There was a smattering of applause. Here, here, someone shouted. This was the moment. The stage was set. I stepped forward from the shadows of the study doorway. I moved through the small crowd which parted for me, a bit confused. I walked until I was standing in the center of the living room, just a few feet from Chloe and Mark. The room grew quiet. All eyes were on me. Chloe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Eleanor, she said, her voice losing some of its sparkle. Is everything all right? I'm fine, Chloe, I said. My voice was calm and it carried in the silent room. I was just so moved by your speech, especially the part about the house having good bones. She relaxed a little, thinking I was paying her a compliment. Well, thank you, Eleanor. It's true. It's a wonderful foundation to build on. It is, I agreed. A foundation is so important, isn't it? I turned my gaze to my son. Mark, do you remember when your father used to say that? Good lines make good buildings. Mark paled. He looked from me to Chloe, a trapped animal. Mom, what are you doing? He whispered. I ignored him. I looked back at Chloe. I just have a few questions. For clarity, you said you're renovating the house to sell it. Is that right? Chloe's smile was tight now. Well, yes, to maximize its value. It's the sensible thing to do. Sensible, I repeated. And the proceeds from the sale would go towards my care at Golden Meadows? Of course, she said, her voice full of false sincerity for her audience. Your security is our primary concern. A murmur of approval went through her friends. What a devoted daughter-in-law. And how much do you estimate my care will cost? I asked. She was thrown by the question. Well, we have the brochures. It's a significant amount over the years. Is it $95,000? I asked, my voice still quiet. Mark flinched as if I had struck him. Chloe stared at me, her mask of poise finally cracking. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? I asked gently. 20,000 for a wedding, 50,000 for a down payment, 10,000 for a business that never was, 5,000 for credit card debt, another 10,000, or was it 15? I have the list in my desk if you'd like to check. It all adds up. I was just wondering if the nest egg from selling my house was meant to pay me back for that, or if that was a separate matter. The silence in the room was no longer polite. It was thick, heavy, and uncomfortable. Chloe's friends were looking at her, their expressions shifting from admiration to a kind of horrified curiosity. Chloe's face was white. This is not the time or the place, she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. I think it's the perfect time and place, I said calmly. You invited all these people to say goodbye to the old. I feel I should have a voice in that. I paused, letting the silence stretch. But there's been a misunderstanding, a rather significant one. Just then, as if on cue, the head of the catering staff approached Chloe with a small, discreet black folder. Mrs. Vance, if I could just settle the final bill. Chloe, desperate for a distraction, snatched the folder. Of course, Jacques. She opened her glittering silver handbag and pulled out a credit card, a heavy, black, metallic one. She handed it to him with a flourish, a small piece of theater to reestablish her status. Here you go. Jacques took it to a small terminal he had set up on the sideboard. He swiped it. A moment passed. He swiped it again. A small, almost inaudible beep echoed in the dead, quiet room. He looked at the screen, then back at Chloe, his face a mask of professional regret. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. It's been declined. Chloe froze. The color drained completely from her face, leaving her skin looking like wax. What? That's impossible. Run it again. I have, twice, Jacques said, clearly mortified. Perhaps you have another card? The silence was now absolute. It was deafening. Every person in that room was holding their breath, witnessing the one thing Chloe's entire life was built to avoid: public financial humiliation. She fumbled in her purse, her hands trembling. She knew she didn't have another card with that kind of limit. This was her showpiece card. I let the moment hang there for a full 10 seconds. I watched the panic in my son's eyes. I watched the foundation of Chloe's world crumble. Then I stepped forward. I opened my small silver clutch and took out two things. One was a folded document. The other was my own card, the dark heavy metal one Mr. Davies had given me. I walked over to the stunned caterer. "Perhaps you can try this one," I said, my voice gentle. I handed him the card. He took it,